You know what's crazy? Rome didn't fall because it was weak. It fell because it wasn't dangerous enough. Look, imagine if Roman soldiers, the same guys who built roads we still use today, suddenly had guns. I'm talking about what would have happened if one Roman alchemist accidentally mixed the right chemicals in 118 AD. The empire would have exploded in size, conquering lands they never reached in our timeline, with technology centuries ahead of schedule. But here's the thing that blew my mind while researching this. The same weapons that would have made Rome unstoppable would have torn it apart even faster. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the most dangerous weapon in history isn't gunpowder. It's human nature itself. Let's get started. Introduction. Imagine a world where Roman engineers, the same brilliant minds who gave us aqueducts, concrete that lasts millennia, and roads that still exist today, turned their genius toward black powder weapons. Picture this. As Roman legionaries march through the muddy forests of Germania, they're exhausted, cold, outnumbered. Suddenly, the centurion raises his hand. Silence falls. He signals to a peculiar cart wheeled forward by 4 men. What happens next will echo through history. But I'm getting ahead of myself. When we think of gunpowder, we imagine Ming Dynasty China, 9th century alchemists seeking immortality who instead found destruction. But what if this world-changing discovery had happened 700 years earlier on the other side of the world? The year is 118 AD. Hadrian, the same emperor who built a 73-mile wall across Britain that still stands today, sits in his palace examining a strange black powder. His engineers, the same brilliant minds who constructed the Pantheon's 142-foot concrete dome that remained the world's largest for 1,300 years, are about to harness something far more powerful than stone. Consider this. At its height, Rome controlled 20% of the world's population and spanned 3 continents. They built 250,000 miles of roads, enough to circle Earth 10 times. They already dominated the ancient world. Now imagine them with firearms. Would this technology have saved Rome from its fate, or hastened its downfall? I want you to look around at your modern life, your buildings, your laws, your languages. All bear Rome's fingerprints. Now imagine how different everything might be if Roman centurions carried primitive muskets instead of gladi. This isn't just a fantasy, it's a window into understanding both Rome's incredible achievements and the fatal weaknesses that even the most powerful weapons couldn't overcome. The journey we're about to take isn't just about alternate history. It's about human nature itself, about how technology transforms societies, and sometimes destroys them. So let's travel back to that moment when an empire stood at the crossroads of destiny, about to discover a power that would change everything. The discovery. The fate of empires often turns on the smallest discoveries, the right invention at the right time. For Rome, that moment might have come in a dimly lit workshop in Alexandria, where an alchemist, driven by dreams of transmutation, unwittingly stumbled upon something far more volatile. A mistake, an explosion, and suddenly, history was teetering on the edge of a new era. Picture this. A Roman alchemist in Egypt, seeking the philosopher's stone. Instead of gold, he creates an explosion that nearly costs him his life, and almost burns down the great library of Alexandria. Alexandria, 118 AD. The night air hangs heavy as Lucius Severus, a Roman alchemist, hunches over his workshop table. Sweat drips from his brow as he grinds saltpeter crystals, the same white substance that naturally forms on cave walls throughout the empire. He's seeking the philosopher's stone, not gunpowder, but fate has other plans. "By Jupiter!" he screams as his mixture erupts in a blinding flash. Scrolls ignite, assistants flee, the workshop burns, but what emerges from those flames isn't just destruction, it's revolution. Think about this. All 3 components of gunpowder existed in abundance throughout Rome. Saltpeter from caves and stables, charcoal from the empire's massive forges that produced 15,000 tons of iron annually, sulfur from Sicily's volcanic Mount Etna, where Romans had been mining since before the Republic. When word reaches Emperor Hadrian, a man who once executed an architect just for criticizing his designs, he doesn't see a curiosity, he sees a weapon, but mastering this power exacts a terrible price. At the testing grounds outside Rome, a demonstration for military tribunes goes horribly wrong. The primitive bronze tube explodes, sending shrapnel through a dozen slaves. Their screams echo across the training field, yet Hadrian doesn't flinch. He merely orders more tests, more subjects. Imagine yourself as that Roman engineer, knowing each failure might mean your execution, each success your elevation. The pressure crushes many. Those who survive create the first Roman thunder weapons. Just as the Chinese would discover centuries later in our timeline, the early tests are wildly unpredictable. For every successful demonstration, 3 devices explode in their operators' hands. The graves outside the imperial testing grounds fill quickly, but then, finally, success. A stable mixture, a reliable design, and the day when Hadrian himself aims the first functioning Roman firearm at a wooden target dressed as a Germanic warrior. The flash, the roar, the empire's future, changing forever. Early implementation. The fire had been lit, but could Rome control the blaze? Discovery was one thing, implementation was another. The raw power of gunpowder had been unleashed, but transforming it into a battlefield advantage would test the limits of Roman ingenuity, metallurgy, and strategy. The empire stood at the edge of a new kind of warfare, one that could either cement its dominance or expose its weaknesses to the world. The first Roman firearms weren't elegant weapons, but crude bronze tubes strapped to wooden frames, more deadly to their operators than the enemy. Imagine a legionary, hands trembling as he lights the fuse, praying to Mars it doesn't explode in his face. Roman metallurgy, already sophisticated enough to produce the famous Lorica segmentata armor with its 700 custom-fitted pieces, now turned toward a deadlier purpose. The same forges that produced 3.5 million javelins annually now cast primitive cannons. The same engineers who built aqueducts spanning 60 miles now designed wheeled artillery platforms. Picture the famous Battle of Teutoburg Forest, where Germanic tribes ambushed and destroyed 3 Roman legions in 9 AD. Now reimagine it with our alternate timeline's weapons. As Germanic warriors charge from the trees, they're met not with javelins, but with a wall of smoke and thunder. One surviving account from our alternate history describes the first field deployment. The barbarians stood frozen as if Neptune himself had turned them to stone. Then came the sound like Zeus hurling lightning, and their front ranks simply disappeared. The psychological impact was devastating. Germanic tribes who believed in thunder gods now faced Romans who seemed to command thunder itself. How do you fight an enemy wielding the power of the divine? Within months, word spread through tribal networks stretching from Britannia to beyond the Danube. Some tribes immediately surrendered. Others, desperate and terrified, launched suicidal attacks hoping to overwhelm the new weapons. But as Roman technology improved, resistance became futile. The standard Roman artillery piece, named Vulcan's hammer, could now fire 20 lead balls simultaneously, turning tight formations into bloody chaos. Yet even as Rome celebrated these conquests, rumors filtered back to the imperial court. Persian spies had been captured near an imperial armory. The secret was getting out. Rome's advantage had an expiration date, and the countdown had begun. The Golden Age of Roman gunpowder. Within 50 years, Rome's borders expanded beyond anything in our timeline. Caledonia falls. Germania is fully conquered. Roman ships with bronze cannons dominate the Mediterranean, the North Sea, and push into the Atlantic. Rome, 180 AD. Emperor Marcus Aurelius stands on a balcony overlooking the Eternal City, now the undisputed center of a world transformed. In just 60 years, Rome's borders have swelled beyond anything we recognize from our history books. Maps are redrawn monthly as legions armed with third-generation lightning spears conquer lands that in our timeline remained forever beyond Roman reach. The Scotland that Hadrian walled off, fully Roman. Germania to the Elbe River, pacified. Roman galleys mounted with bronze Neptunes, early swivel guns, now patrol as far as the Baltic Sea, where amber merchants pay tribute in exchange for protection. Think about what this means. In our actual history, Rome controlled about 2 million square miles and governed 70 million people. In this alternate timeline, add another million square miles and 30 million subjects. Roman tax collectors now travel roads that in our world wouldn't see civilization for another 1,000 years. But the true revolution isn't just in conquest, it's in society itself. A new elite emerges: the bombardiers, specialists in the black powder arts. Their guild houses in major cities become centers of both military and civilian innovation. They develop controlled burning techniques that transform mining, allowing Romans to extract minerals from depths impossible in our timeline. Roman trade ships, now armed against pirates, establish routes as far as India and possibly even China. Imagine the irony: Romans trading with the very civilization that would actually discover gunpowder in our world. The Senate authorizes the most ambitious public works projects in history, including a massive canal through the Isthmus of Corinth, completed in 175 AD, a project that in our world wouldn't succeed until 1893. This is the zenith of human civilization to this point, a united Mediterranean world with technology centuries ahead of our timeline. The famous Pax Romana now extends across a third of Europe. Yet even as Rome basked in its golden age, shadows lengthened within the empire. Conquests slowed, but the forges never did. The legions, once united in purpose, now eyed one another with suspicion. The weapons that had brought Rome unparalleled power were no longer aimed at her enemies. They were being hoarded, studied, and soon turned inward. The Pax Romana was built on fire and thunder. Now, that same thunder threatened to tear the empire apart. The inevitable decline. But power, even gunpowder-enhanced power, couldn't save Rome from itself. Rome in 235 AD. The grand boulevards that once echoed with triumphal parades now lie silent, marred by craters from artillery fire. The Eternal City has endured 3 emperors in the past year alone, each one rising and falling not by the traditional blade, but by the barrel of increasingly sophisticated weapons. Imagine standing in the Roman Forum, where Cicero once delivered his orations, now watching as rival Praetorian Guard units exchange volleys of lead shot. The civilian death toll mounts daily. Buildings that survived for centuries collapse in hours. Remember the crisis of the 3rd century from our actual history. That chaotic period saw 26 emperors in 50 years, most murdered by their own troops. Now picture that same political chaos, but with each faction armed with primitive firearms and artillery. The haunting account of one senator captures the horror. Our legions no longer face outward against barbarians, but inward against each other. The weapons that conquered the world now tear it apart. We created thunder to subdue our enemies, only to be deafened by it ourselves. Beyond Rome's frontiers, the technological advantage that once seemed insurmountable has evaporated like morning mist. Persian engineers, having captured Roman gunsmiths during border skirmishes, now produce their own fire lances. Sassanid cavalry, already formidable with their compound bows, become nearly unstoppable when armed with saddle-mounted pistols, able to fire, wheel away, and reload. The Germanic tribes that once fled in terror now raid with their own crude but effective firearms. They lack Roman metallurgical skill, but compensate with larger calibers and fearless tactics. By 260 AD, what was unthinkable has happened. The Emperor Valerian, armed with the most advanced weapons of the age, surrenders to Persian forces at Edessa. In our timeline, he was the only Roman emperor ever captured alive by enemies. In this timeline, he surrenders an arsenal that will spread Roman weapons technology throughout the East. The empire that Gunpowder built is now being dismantled by the very same technology. Rome's greatest invention has become its most terrible nemesis. The alternate world. So what would our world look like today if Rome had mastered gunpowder 1,000 years early? Imagine standing in the ruins of Rome, not in 476 AD as history records, but in 350 AD, over a century earlier. The accelerated collapse brought by gunpowder warfare has reshaped our timeline dramatically. What rises from these ashes isn't the medieval world we know, but something far different. Europe, 800 AD in this alternate history. Where Charlemagne should be crowning himself emperor, we instead find a patchwork of advanced city-states, each possessing firearms technology that in our world wouldn't exist for another 700 years. The Dark Ages as we know them never fully materialized. The knowledge of mechanics, chemistry, and metallurgy preserved by the practical need to maintain weapons. Think about this. In our timeline, the water wheel took centuries to spread across Europe. In this gunpowder-accelerated world, water-powered mills for processing sulfur and charcoal drove an early industrial revolution by the 5th century. Mechanical knowledge advanced out of military necessity. Christianity's rise follows a dramatically different path. Without Constantine's conversion in our 4th century, perhaps it remains one religion among many, or perhaps it spreads even faster among populations devastated by gunpowder wars, offering spiritual solace to survivors of mechanical slaughter. The Islamic expansion that shaped our 7th and 8th centuries encounters not fragmented post-Roman territories, but regions already armed with early firearms. Would Muhammad's followers have still swept across North Africa and into Spain facing such weapons? Or would they have adopted and improved upon these technologies, creating an even more formidable caliphate? Perhaps most fascinating is what happens in places Rome never reached. Imagine Norse raiders in the 9th century, not with axes and shields, but with primitive blunderbusses. Imagine the kingdoms of West Africa developing their own gunpowder variants through trade networks. The Mayans and Aztecs possibly receiving gunpowder technology through transatlantic contact centuries before Columbus. The ripple effects are endless, each historical domino falling differently, creating a world unrecognizable to us, all because a Roman alchemist accidentally mixed the right minerals together 7 centuries before history records gunpowder's discovery. Conclusion. As the echoes of our alternate history fade, we're left with a sobering truth. Technology, even revolutionary technology, cannot save a civilization from itself. Rome's greatest enemy was never the Goths, the Persians, or the Huns. It was Rome. What began as a weapon of conquest became the instrument of suicide. The same legions that used gunpowder to expand Rome's borders eventually turned those weapons inward, accelerating the empire's fall. Perhaps there's a lesson here for our own world. We create technologies believing they'll solve our problems, only to discover they often amplify our existing flaws. The powder keg isn't the technology, it's us. Would gunpowder have changed Rome's destiny? Yes, but not in the way they might have hoped. It would have merely changed how Rome met that destiny, perhaps even hastened it. The most powerful empire in history, armed with weapons from the future, still couldn't escape the most fundamental law of civilization. What builds us up can also tear us down. That's all for today. If you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to show some love by hitting that like and subscribe button.